In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create custom title animations using Red 5 and Sony Vegas Pro. Hey, how's it going? Today I'm going to show you how to create some cool title animations in Sony Vegas Pro using Red 5. Although actually Red 5 also works as a standalone application, so you can use it anywhere that you have a computer. Alright, so you can see a lot of different styles of animation here. So time-on animations, some 3D transforms, and some transitions. So a lot of cool stuff. We're going to start with an effect that simulates falling letters, like gravity. Okay, so let's get into that. Let's also hide this background. Just want to focus on the text today. So we're going to launch the Red UI. See, I've already hidden the background in red. First thing I want to do is turn off motion blur. It looks great. You got to remember to turn it on when you're done, but it really slows things down when you're creating the effect. Okay, so here's the end result. Let's create it from scratch. I'm going to delete everything here. Start with a new word. Gravity is appropriate. Also note, you can change a lot of different things about your text from this window alone. Skew, baseline, tracking, leading, font, the word itself, of course, but we're going to leave it as plain old white text for now. Alright, so this is supposed to be falling. Start by putting it above the screen. Good place to start. And let's make it accelerate. Gravity is a force, and forces cause acceleration by definition, so a little physics lesson for you there. Bring this down to a rest position, about halfway down the screen is good enough. Now at this point, we're going to use a couple of tricks. I'm going to go into Red's new graph mode, just focusing on the position Y. And what I'm going to do is change these handles. So I'm going to click Alt and then mouse click on it. It gives me the ability to do one handle at a time. Okay, and see how sharp I'm making these? That's going to give the motion kind of a springboard effect. Now, next, I click on this keyframe and then copy and paste it down the timeline. Oh, look at that. We already have a nice parabolic motion automatically forming itself. And if you want to get really technical, it should go about half the height and distance each time. And of course, that would happen, infinitum, but we don't have infinitum today, so let's do 3. That's good enough. Alright, so this first bounce looks a little bit more than half, so I'm going to click and drag, bring it down there. It can be a little bit hard to tell which curve you are dealing with, but it's pretty easy to tell once you're moving it. Oh, see, that was the wrong one, but it's so easy to correct it. Not a big deal at all. Okay, and this one is going to be a very small bounce. Okay, now I'm going to go to the end, copy and paste that keyframe one last time, and change the interpolation to hold. That will take care of that nice other thing for me. Alright, let's see if this looks like it's falling. Bam, bam, bam. Yeah. So it's kind of like a, simulated fall for sure, but it definitely looks realistic. Great. Now, let's make the letters wiggle and jitter a bit on each bounce. One of my favorite things to do. Alright, so we're going to select jitter. Another trick is that when you're using the jitter function, you don't want to animate these individual parameters unless you have to. At least maybe that's just a personal preference of mine, but I think it's much easier to set these to be constant and then just animate the master jitter amount here. So we don't want to go crazy with it, but we do want to, make it look like it's really hitting something. Oh, gotta remember to select different keyframes. Okay, so deselect that one when I go here. Okay, that way when it hits, bam. Okay, so same idea, I can copy and paste this one every time. Oh, left my track there. Every time it has a bounce. That's another nice thing about doing the bounces with just the curves. You don't have to use too many keyframes. Okay, so in between these two, we still need some jitter. Oh, gotta deselect that last keyframe again. Yeah, geez, you'd think I'd remember those things. And like the bouncing, you kind of want the jitter to go down about half each time, but no one's really gonna pay attention. Unless they do, then you should. Nice. Fun little bouncing letters, which just can't get enough of that bouncing. Let's make sure they stop bouncing at the end. Alright, a couple of the things that we did in this session. We had the text swing around and then fly off. So I'm going to plan for the flying away first because that's easier. I'm going to just go into the main text track here and animate the position X. Actually, you know what? Let's have it do a decelerate. That way it'll start faster. There we go. That's the one I want. I'm so used to graph mode. Huh. Alright. So, bang! Good. Now, to give it the illusion of some inertia, it's like a physics class today, isn't it? We're going to go into the text tab and animate some of these transforms here that we saw earlier. So we're going to do letter skew. Linear. Push that up a bit. And it doesn't have to be too much, just enough to make it look like it's, you know, getting some resistance. Nice. Now, I don't know if you noticed this, but when we had the text spin around here, we also had the letters fly apart a little bit to simulate the centripetal force. So to do that, we're just going to change the tracking. Now this part's a little trickier because we don't actually have it rotating yet. We're going to try to make the rotation match the spread of the letters and not the other way around. Okay, so about here, tracking 0. It's fine. And here, tracking 0. Bounce, spread out, and fly away. Okay, so my timing's a little bit different than it was before, but you know, you see how it's creating the effect that we had previously. Now I'm going to put this in a container. The container just makes it easier to move around your text in 3D space. Think of it like a camera in some sense. So we're going to start a bit further back and end a little bit closer, maybe. Okay, so now we have a nice kind of arcing motion the whole time. Same thing with the spin. I want to end at an angle like 47 degrees. Maybe more, maybe less. Definitely less right there. So we're going to go 0. Okay, there's our big spin action. So we want it to have completed, let's say, 1 full spin by that point. Bounce, spin, fly away. There it is. And of course, when you're all done, then you would add the motion blur back in, and everything would look awesome. Okay, so gravity complete. Let's move on to the next effect. Next, what we're going to do is create a title transition using the type on feature in Red. And this time we're going to do a little bit of trickery by using 2 text tracks. Okay, first things first, let's create 2 text tracks. Let's say we're doing credits for a movie starring James Stewart and I don't know who else. We'll decide later. Alright, so James Stewart is in this movie. Here's his name. Now to do the type on, we want to make sure that we don't get rid of the letters too soon. So we're going to animate type on, but I'm going to start at, let's say, 100. Okay, keep it at 100 there, and then make him go away. Bye, James Stewart. Okay, now in addition to having it just disappear like that, we're going to make it fade out by changing the fade. and we're going to change the reveal time so that there's a little bit more overlap, and we're going to make the letters rotate. Say 1 complete rotation should do. Okay, fun stuff. Okay, the reason I did all that before creating the second track is that now I can just copy and paste or duplicate this track and change who I want this to be. So that was James Stewart. Let's put him with Martha James. You thought I was going to say Martha Stewart, didn't you? Well, she's still alive, so I don't want to, impose on any copyrights or anything here. Alright, so we have the two names, and as we scrub the timeline, they both go away. Well, what good is that, right? But they have the same timing. So if I go into the type on text again here, all I have to do is reverse the values for Martha. So every time it's 100, I'll just make it 0. Every time it's 0, I'll just make it 100. Okay, now actually that looks pretty damn cool too, but we want it to match up exactly. So to do that, you just change the order from forward to reverse, and there you go. Now the cool thing about this is that once you create it, you can save it as a preset, if you will, in your library. So I've got all these different presets that have been saved. This happens to be one of them. And then you can load it anytime for any text that you want. So I can go back in here anytime and just change what this says. Maybe I want it to be Spike Allen. That's actually a pretty good name. Okay. And notice that the letters still overlap at the appropriate time, even though the names are different lengths. So you can do that. You can even just duplicate both of these and change them again. So you could, use this as your default credit sequence if you wanted. Be really easy, and it's fun looking. Alright, let's move on to the next effect. Okay, next we're going to look at this jumbled letters effect. So this time we have a very simple motion on the text, but you can see it's doing a really cool auto scramble thing. So what I want to do is turn off this text, show you how that's done. I'm going to create some different text. Access granted. I think that's appropriate for the effect we're doing here. And let's change the style of the text for once. Let's make it red. And after all, this is red text, so it should be red text. Okay, so let's do some cool animation on this. I wonder if they have a make things funny filter in this product. Alright, so we're going to use the generator tab. Now check this out. Letter variation. So you can obscure anything just by using this one little feature. It saves you a lot of time and, frustrated finger motion on the keyboard. You can also change how it's randomized. Let's keep everything alphabetical text. And one other thing you want to keep in mind is that if this number doesn't change, then the scrambled letters don't change. But if you animate them, then they do. So it's kind of like a random seed setting. Okay, so we don't want to start it there. We want to start it here. And it doesn't really matter what number it's at. The only numbers that really matter are non-zero and 0. So we're going to have it become granted here. Oh, I had the keyframe selected there. Okay, so there. This one should be linear, and it should be 100. Okay. Now it's still just kind of like randomly good. Next we're going to change the progress parameter. This is going to give us the kind of progression through the text that we want to see. Okay, so now you can see it going through the letters when I deselect it like I should. Ugh, my goodness. Keep forgetting that one detail. Alright, so it's good, but it's going from left to right. Let's make it go right to left. There we go. Now, we could stop there because that looks, really cool on its own, but let's add a little bit of type-on animation to make the transformation more dramatic. So what I want to do is go to this first keyframe, I'll remember that this time, And let's put a nice shift in Y, just a little one, a nice shift in fade, maybe half, and a shift in scale, maybe X and Y. Okay, so now I have to animate the type on. We're going to start at 0, make it linear, and end where the randomize text ends. Okay, now I know what you're thinking. You just undid all the randomized text that you set up. Well, watch this. Now I'm going to say always visible. Now we can see it the whole time, but every time it changes, there's a visual cue that something is going on. So it makes a cool effect even better. And of course, the last thing we did was to just, move the text Z space and put a motion blur on it. This is the easiest part. Bye-bye. Access granted. And 0. And there it is. Of course, we had motion blur on it too, but that just slows it down here. Okay, next, let's look at this one. This is a text on a path, as well as using the type on in a creative way. So here I am back in red with this text path and neat type on effect. So what I'm going to do is actually delete these two, start with a new sentence, and I think this is appropriate for the effect, and it avoids copyright infringement. So let's go into our timeline and let's create a text path. In the text tab here, just click on path, select make path track. In your timeline, there is a new track called text path. Select that, and now you're automatically using the pen tool in your composite window here. So anything I create will automatically be a text path. There it is. Okay, so I've got that. Now I'm going to duplicate this track, but I'm going to hide the one that I made there. We'll work with that later. Now let's do the type on effect. So type on, I'm going to start at 0. Just do a nice simple type on effect. All the way, hold, do a fade, increase the reveal time to get more of the letters faded at once. That's nice. Now I'm going to take this whole track down and stop it as soon as the type on is done. Now I'm going to reveal the bottom track. I'm going to start it as soon as the top one ends, so it looks like the letters never go away. Next thing I'm going to do is use type on in this track, but I'm going to use always on. So I'm going to start at 0 and end here. And now, start at 0 and end here. And now the only question is, what do you want the text animation to be? Well, I'm going to scale it up. So because it's always visible, the text is still going to transform, but you're going to see it before and after. It'll automatically, fill in the gaps. So it creates just basically a fun auto-transforming function for you. Alright, and that's how that was done. Pretty simple stuff. Next, we're going to have it fly off the motion path. So we're going to go back into this path tab. As soon as that's done, I'm going to make this a linear interpolation and then just, zip it off like so. And that's it. And of course there was a motion blur like there was in everything else. But we don't need to see that again. Moving on. Next we have another example of text on a path, but this time combined with the jitter effect. So let's go back into red and see how this effect is set up. So I'm going to delete everything, create some new text about circular logic is ... Suspenseful. Okay, so we have our text. Let's shrink it down a bit, actually, since we want to make it fit around our text path. And now I'm going to create another text path, but this time I'm not going to use the pen. I'm going to just use one of these shapes here. I'm going to hold Alt to make a perfect circle from this oval, and I'm going to reposition the circle more center screen. Okay, and you can see how the text automatically wraps to it. Very nice. If I want to change how it aligns, I can center it, distribute it, do all sorts of things. I like center. Now, let's use jitter, but let's not use it how we've done before. I am going to increase these very high, set them to constant like we did before, but I'm going to turn off jitter speed. Okay, that's going to make it a lot less chaotic, and there's going to be a lot of motion going on here, so it's going to be a good thing. Okay, so we'll start 200, why not? Now let's do decelerate, that's better. And we'll stop it here, and it can be held there from that point on. Good. Another thing I'm going to change is I'm going to go into the transform and animate the baseline. So this way I can keep the text as far or close from the path as I want. So I'm going to start pretty far away and let it come in here. And I do want it to go gradually away from the baseline again. So I'm going to have it spread out. Alright, so there's that. Next, I want to put an angle on this, so I'm going to just rotate the whole track, give it a tumble. Don't need to animate that. That looks good. And the last thing to do is just animate the text on the path. And it can always be moving, so we'll start it at some value there. And you can see that looks pretty cool as is. This is another great example of how the motion blur can really add a lot to your effect. Okay, so we're up to the last effect in this sequence of titles, and this one is probably one of the easier effects to set up. So it's a nice swish pan looking transition between 3 different titles. If I go into red, you can see here that it's actually made of just a title container. I expand that, you can see the 3 different titles within the track. Let me delete the whole thing and show you how it works. So first things first, let's say we are casting Dreamcast here. So let's say Zoe Star Girl, because I can't spell her last name. And let's create another one. Let's say Eliza Rockstar. Again, these are great names. I don't know why more people don't use them. And of course, let's put myself in there too. I'll just give myself a normal name. Okay, so we have our 3 names here, all equally good names. Now one thing I'm going to do that I haven't done before is I'm going to change the type of track this is. So normally, text is just a 3D line art. If I make it a 3D plane, I have some new tabs up here. Most importantly, lights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn down the ambient light and turn on like 1 light to illuminate the text. Now notice how much texture that gives it. Okay, it makes it look a lot more dramatic. I'm going to change this to a spotlight. We don't need to move the light around, so I'll constant if I hold these. So you can see the nice spotlight effect on the text. I'm going to turn off OpenGL mode, give me access to the target reticule, and let's make these constant. I'm going to go back into OpenGL mode and expand the cone width, but make it a bit fuzzier, fall off. Maybe increase the intensity a bit, and of the ambient too. Okay, so that makes it look a lot more dramatic. It's kind of a way to give texture to your text without having to give texture to your text. Now suppose I want these others to have that too. It'll be faster just to do that, duplicate my name and change what the names are. I forget what I called her before. I'll just say Girl Rocks. And Zoe is some. I think these are made-up names still, so, you know, I should be safe. Okay, so I've got my 3 titles on top of each other, and you can't tell them apart. So if I create a title container for these 3, I've got all these different animation styles I can choose from. Let's say I do roll. That automatically puts them all together in an animated roll effect. Now, the nice thing about this is that you don't have to have one really long, text file for your credit sequence. You can just do it all, one at a time. You can also change the animation style really easily. Here's a crawl. Let's do shuffle, though. That's the one that you saw before. Defaults to a vertical shuffle. Let's change it to horizontal. We can change how much it holds and how quickly the names come in and out and how long they overlap. And, of course, we added our favorite effect of the evening, a jitter, to the text on the last one here. And you can probably guess we just did it by animating the master jitter amount and nothing else. Almost forgot to unselect at that time. Alright. So we have that set up, and that took all of a few seconds. To make it look more impressive, of course, add a motion blur. And it doesn't hurt to put a little bit of a angular animation on your title container. Also, a little bit of in and out Z motion helps too. Alright, and there it is. And once you have a style that you like, again, you can save it as a preset in your library browser and apply it to any text that you want. You can see I've already got this one saved here. I can just double click on this anytime, load up the one that I had earlier, and maybe just replace the text here. So I don't want it to say Boris RED. I want it to say Herman's leg. Get really close to those copyright infringements. Okay, so it's a really convenient way to create a lot of different templates in one host, and that's great. Okay, so if you liked what you saw here and want to try it out for yourself, as usual, you can go to our website and download a fully functioning trial version, and that's all at borisfx.com.